I think there were several ahas, but the one that I think jumped out the most was probably just how excited people are as far as alternative access options. So historically, you know, companies have had to use either copper or coax and obviously fiber for the last several years. And now with fixed wireless popping up all over the world, as well as 4 and 5G, I think a lot of models and um, uh, a lot of innovation is going to be enabled because of that alternative access and the ability to do that in a much more real time and opportunistic way than having to plan out with anywhere from 30 to 120-day lead times for traditional access enabled solutions. Well, it's definitely been in for a while. I don't think Verizon or any of the 5G providers have said, "Oh, COVID," and now all of a sudden we've got this great idea for next gen wireless solutions. So I think COVID um, certainly validated a lot of the business cases that were out there. You saw things like telemedicine and other things and other network-based solutions that needed to be spun up fairly quickly. And depending on where things were in the COVID cycle, um, business models and solutions around that had to be spun up all over the world fairly quickly in terms of a telemedicine standpoint. And that's just one example. So, yeah, I think COVID helped validate that. And I think it brought out a lot of the innovative juices that are possible as a result of this network enablement with things like 4 or 5G wireless. Sure. So Advantage historically has been, a full life cycle global consultancy and managed service provider, assisting our clients with everything and anything that is originally telecom, infrastructure, cloud, and security. And the lines have really become fuzzy as to where one stops and when one starts. And so, what we help our clients in figuring out is where they are today. What is a comprehensive business case as it pertains to how the network and connectivity can enable everything from obviously cost savings, but more transformational in terms of new business models and revolutionary revenue streams that were not possible years ago because of the change in technology and operating models. So we do this on a global standpoint. We do this with every size company, from small companies all the way up to global 500 clients. And we do it on a full life cycle basis. So helping them from everything from design and engineering to constructing that business case, to implementing that business case, to then post live supporting that business case with things like incident management and change management. So it's been quite a busy year for us as two things were happening. Number one was the obvious with COVID, but really the other biggest thing that has been in place for the last couple of years has been this digital business transformation. And the network sits at the center of that digital business transformation, where there's not a business out there, or frankly, any entity, whether it's government, nonprofit, or a business, that somehow has not been dramatically dependent and needed to rely on the network to support their services, to support their clients, to support new business opportunities. The best evidence of that is just ask any taxi driver what Lyft or any other models that have been so enabled by network competition. It's an excellent question. I'm not sure that one is not a coincidence. We had seen a lot of velocity even before COVID of a lot of the C-suite executives, not just the CIO, but the CFO and the CEO and the chief strategy officers and even smaller size companies really putting an emphasis on the network and enabling that infrastructure so that it would allow them greater agility, speed to market, being able to deliver their services in a more business digital transformative way. However, I don't think it's a coincidence that COVID expedited that. I think COVID allowed um, a lot of businesses the cover, if you will, to say, hey, we have no choice. We're not going to be a traditional, folks aren't coming into the offices anyway. So the network is going to enable our employees to just do their day-to-day jobs. And a byproduct of that is that by enabling that, they actually enabled that transformation to happen probably quicker than it might otherwise would have. As far as your second question, which is the technical ramifications or the technology ramifications, it's interesting. Certainly, security has become more integrated with the network, whereas there was network security, there was physical security, there was SOC services and all types of different security swim lanes and stovepipes. That has become far more integrated. So, for example, when you see the SD-WAN, Gartner obviously calls it SASE now, secure access, secure edge. I'm sorry, I'm butchering the acronym. But anyway, the idea is that that the SD-WAN, which was focused primarily on optimization of the network and primarily focused on being able to provide an active auto failover, much easier technology and model. Now, next gen firewalls and now UTM and other types of security offerings have been fully integrated into that offering. So what might have been several physical different devices being deployed at clients in clients' environments and at the edge and in their premises, now those devices are combined, and the logical architecture, if you will, the logical configuration of those boxes has been consolidated to one, and in a software defined type of operating model and technology and architecture. So that's been the biggest thing. However, that said, the technology has been out there for a while and has been really fantastic. Whether you're talking Palo Alto or Fortinet or Viptela or VeloCloud, they're fantastic technologies, and several other names that I didn't name. However, where we see the differentiator and the big transformation part of it, as I see it, has been in the operating model. Deploying the technology is great, and the technology certainly does a lot, but it's the operating model around that. Players like Masergy and others have some very significant and attractive models for clients that are dramatically different. They're the proverbial better, cheaper, faster. And that's what we've seen really mature over the last year. Is the technology's gotten better, but the operating models have caught up that can really benefit enterprises and small to mid-sized businesses in terms of this mission critical asset, the network, if you will, that allows them to be innovative and think about the network in ways that they might otherwise not have, traditionally just as a utility. ISPs have done a very good job of, I think that's where COVID really proved itself in terms of, or where the internet really proved itself, is just how resilient, most folks don't have MPLS from home, right? Their home office. They were coming over broadband. And I'm not saying that everything was perfect, by no means, but productivity, I don't think, took a big hit. And the internet showed how resilient and how viable it could be in a distributed environment, which gave people confidence that when they do go back to work, to use it as a core hub. I mean, not a core hub, a core node, if you will, on a client's premise, office networks and office connectivity. Well, there's no shortage of options. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of ISPs and resellers and models out there, and it can be quite daunting and vexing. Frankly, this is something that we've built an entire, business model around. Is it's a key component is the sourcing and the provisioning. So when clients are seeking to figure out, especially if they're upgrading their network. So, 10 meg became the new T1s, 100 meg became the new 10 megs. A gig has become the new 100 megs. So I think one of the fellow panelists was talking about just how economically viable the options are to really get plenty of bandwidth, of which, frankly, 2 years from now, what you think is plenty of capacity is probably not going to be. So a lot of folks are starting to architect around, what does a 10 gig connectivity architecture look like as opposed to 100 meg today, and planning for those, which frankly might be as early as next year, where 10 gig becomes the new standard. Certainly in data centers, we already see that, if not, 100 gig. That said, as far as pricing it out, it really comes down to, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, the operating model, right? So there may be no shortage, but to try to have and deal with multiple ISPs around the globe is an administrative and an operational nightmare. That's why folks standardize on maybe one global or two global ISPs. However, the economics and the performance aren't necessarily there because those global ISPs may not necessarily be strong in a particular region of the world that somebody operates, or even within the United States, within a particular state or locale. So really it comes down to doing your homework and working, frankly, that's what we do. So we take a look at what's available. We have all kinds of tools that pull to understand who's on net and near net for a particular location. We also try to understand the diversity. Usually someone's not going with just one ISP for one particular location, but just because you're network diverse, meaning going with two separate ISPs, doesn't mean that you're as protected as you need to be, and therefore the resiliency may not be there. So taking a look at path diversity, taking a look at CO diversity, taking a look at other things, alternative access. I mentioned fixed wireless and 5G and what's available and what's not. Looking at SLAs and understanding all those pieces of the puzzle so that clients can make informed decisions. Because really, when you're putting in connectivity, you're probably going to be putting it in for at least 3 years. We still don't see that, it's a 1 year or 2 year commitment. It's still a multi-year commitment. And so selecting the right ISP to not just from a diversity or a price standpoint, but also from an administrative and operating standpoint, and understanding, can I standardize on one ISP for, say, Asia Pacific, or for Australia, or for North America? That's the iterative process that we recommend that clients go through. It can be quick if you work with someone who knows what they're doing and has those relationships in place. Not to sound like a commercial, but we certainly do. But that is very difficult. Most clients don't know what they don't know, so they go to the same 4 or 5 ISPs that they're familiar with and assume that they're going to be able to get, that diversity, get that economics, get that operating model, get that administrative ease of administration, and so on and so forth going. So that's the way that we would approach it, is that we would probably recommend, that you want to make sure that you do your homework at each site, understand what the options are, but then iterate from there so that you don't have an administrative and operational nightmare in dealing with hundreds of different ISPs in each part of your footprint. MPLS is not necessarily disappearing. It may not be growing as fast. In fact, it may not be growing. It may be more about a retention, because we're seeing that the economics for MPLS are coming down, and all else being equal, of course, you'd rather have an MPLS node than a DIA node for a variety of secure and performance reasons and SLA reasons. That said, we see certain industries are going to continue to be very dependent, healthcare and financial services, where latency and jitter and those types of things, where especially if you operate outside of a particular region, if you're just in New York City, then latency is not going to be a big deal. But if you're connecting New York to India, to Hong Kong, to Europe, you need a pretty strong private backbone, especially if you're doing shared services and shared applications amongst those regions where they're dependent on outside of their particular region that they operate. So two things that we saw. Number one is that MPLS pricing has come down, and therefore keeping it is not as, or switching out of it is not as attractive financial option. And number two, there are still qualitative reasons, especially if you operate globally or multi-regional, as to why it is that MPLS, from a performance and from a resiliency standpoint, still makes sense. And that's where we see. I think the panel was somewhat unanimous in that consensus. Yeah, there's been some. We untie some serious Gordian knots in our day-to-day working with our clients. Our clients bring some very challenging connectivity problems that they're trying to solve. There's particular regions of the world that we've worked with large multinational, whether that's in chemicals and manufacturing, or whether that's in pharmaceutical and healthcare, or less so in financial services. Financial services tends to be in more mature and more densely available connectivity solutions. But the other industries that I just mentioned, and same thing with NGOs, frankly, they're operating in parts of the world, whether that's Central Asia or parts of South America or the Middle East or Africa or Eastern Europe. In fact, all of those I just mentioned for particular clients. There's approximately 200 or so countries and multiple territories around the world. It is very, very, and I believe there's 4 countries in particular, North Korea being one of them, where you're not allowed to get connectivity other than directly through the state enterprise. That said, finding in connectivity in Uzbekistan or even in the United Arab Emirates and other places, getting that connectivity and getting it at a price point that is affordable. In some cases, some of these, I think people would be shocked that a 10 meg dedicated internet access can be, thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars in some parts of the world still. So there are several of those case studies where we, clients provide us basically just service address or just longitude, latitude coordinates. And absolutely, we'll find them not just one connection, but as diverse a possibility that's available, the maximum diversity there, because oftentimes in those remote places of the world, that's where dual node matters even more than frankly in more mature markets, where if power goes out at a central office or something like that because the infrastructure in that particular locale is not mature enough. So it's that type of design that matters as much. It's not just finding the connectivity providers, it's finding more than one, because otherwise, putting all your eggs in one basket for connectivity can be, you're down a lot more than you would want to be for that particular site. And obviously that has all kinds of business and cost implications for that particular customer. So making a site resilient in those parts of the world has been something that we've done over and over and over again, where the before and after, a site might be down once a week because of connectivity, which related to power and so on. Now, all of a sudden, because of the solution that we've implemented for those sites, do they still have downtime? Absolutely. Is it once a week? No, nowhere near. It's much closer to probably, a 2 nines or a 3 nines type situation in terms of what we're seeing, where they're up 99% of the time. We try to look at it from an overall basis. In the past, folks have looked at buying a car part by part. And what we tell them is, let's look at it from a total cost of the network and view it that way. So they've been a little bit more liberal and not allocating to, say, Uzbekistan, which was my example before. Hey, we know the cost of doing business for connectivity is much more expensive. We'll spread that out across. So they've been more gentle with those specific sites so that specific site's budget is not overwhelmed by just the high cost of connectivity. That said, no, folks have invested quite aggressively because they've understood that the network is is mission critical to not just as a utility, but mission critical in terms of their way of doing business, servicing their clients, delivering new goods and services to their clients, and so on and so forth. We have. So, and it's still immature, and it's still more of a, a tertiary node, or just a one-off that it may be the only option. So there's a lot of innovative companies out there that are building some pretty wonderful travel experiences for folks. But those travel experiences are in parts of the world where there is, and that's the attraction of it, where there is no infrastructure whatsoever. So how do you provide, reservation access to reservation applications, or the concierge desk at some of these villas, and so on and so forth? Satellite and ship-to-shore type solutions are something that we work with quite a bit for those types of situations. Mining companies is another example of an industry that benefits from satellite. They get it. Good enough is good enough, because it's the only thing that's available. They're not going to be providing the same 5 nines type of connectivity options that you would see maybe in Manhattan or Paris or something like that. I think whether you're a small business or a large global, multinational business, the network and the connectivity have never been more strategic and mission critical. To not have that in place, or to not think about it strategically, and to think about it as just, I just got to call up my local connectivity, you're missing out on just how important that application, even though it's a network, it's infrastructure. To think of it as an application is a little head scratching for a lot of folks. That's the way that we think about it, and that's the way that we approach it. And that's what spurs innovation. That's what spurs changes in business model. That's also what spurs your ability to stay in business, frankly, as I mentioned. The examples of Airbnb or Uber or Lyft and so on and so forth have proven out.